The night Marcus set down the money was the same night he almost did not come out at all. He had been running his cart on the corner of Delmar and 5th for 11 years by then, and for most of those years the math had been the same quiet disaster: propane and ice and produce costs on one side, and slow foot traffic and a handful of loyal regulars on the other. That Tuesday in October he had cleared $46 by 6 in the evening, and his hands smelled of onion, and his lower back had been talking to him since noon. He was thinking about rolling in early. He was thinking about the bottle of aspirin on his bathroom shelf and the 2 hours of sleep he might steal before his daughter Imani called from school, the way she did every night just to check on him. He did not roll in early, he stayed. And that is where the story begins. Not with the money, not with the woman who would change everything, but with Marcus Webb standing at his corner cart in the October wind, too tired to quit, too stubborn to go home. If you have ever watched a good man hold on past the point where holding on makes sense, you already know what comes next. Stay with this one. Because what Marcus did not know that night, what he could not possibly have known, was that the woman who would one day own half the block he stood on had just pulled out of the parking structure across the street. Her name was Diane Cole, and she was not the kind of woman people looked at twice on Delmar and 5th. She dressed plain when she was working because she had learned long ago that the men who underestimated her tended to give her better deals. On that October night she wore a grey wool coat and flat shoes, and she carried a canvas bag from a grocery store, and when she stopped at Marcus's cart she was looking at the steam rising from the foil pans and thinking about dinner for one. She had $100 bill. Then she had 2 more. She handed all 3 across the stainless steel counter because she was tired too, and she did not feel like waiting for change, and the total came to $8.50. Marcus looked at the bills. He looked at her. She was already turning toward the parking structure. "Ma'am," he said. "Ma'am, you left me $300. She turned back slowly. "I know," she said. "Keep it." He did not keep it. He came round the cart, and people on the sidewalk had to step aside, and he pressed the folded bills into her hand, and he told her plainly that he could not accept charity, that he was not in the business of taking what he had not earned, that she should put that money somewhere it could do her some good. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she took the bills. She folded them into her coat pocket. "What's your name?" she said. "Marcus," he said. "Marcus Webb." She nodded once, the way a person nods when they are filing something. She picked up her foil container and walked to her car. Marcus watched her go. Then he went back to his cart and finished his shift. He had no idea who she was. He had no idea what she did or what she was about to do, or that the decision he had just made in 11 seconds, standing in the wind on a Tuesday night, was going to come back to him like water finding its level. He didn't know. He just went home and took his aspirin and waited for Imani to call. Marcus Darnell Webb was 51 years old, and he had been feeding people on that corner since he was 40. Before the cart, he had worked 14 years in the receiving dock of a produce wholesaler, unloading trucks from 4 in the morning until the world outside started to get light. He had been good at that job. He had been dependable and quiet, and he had learned the names of every driver on the route, and he had never called in sick without cause. When the wholesaler folded in 2013, he had received 2 weeks of severance pay and a handshake from a manager who would not meet his eyes. He used the severance to buy the cart. His ex-wife, Celeste, had not understood the cart. She had not understood a lot of things by that point: the long hours, the cold winters, the smell he carried home, and eventually she had stopped trying to understand and had just gone. She was in Charlotte now. She was doing fine from what Imani told him. Marcus wished her well. He genuinely did. Imani was 22 and finishing a nursing program in Columbus. She called every night at 9 because Marcus had asked her to, because the cart was a solo operation and nobody else was going to check on him. She knew the corner, knew the regulars, could name every customer her father had ever mentioned by name. She worried about him in the particular way that daughters worry about fathers who are too proud to say when something hurts. The cart had never made Marcus rich. In a good month, he cleared $1,800 after costs. In January, he cleared closer to $800. He owned his cart outright, had since the 4th year, and he rented the corner from the building's property management company at $600 a month, a figure that had crept up steadily and had just that year crossed into a range that gave him genuine trouble. The building was an old 3-story commercial property, ground floor retail with apartments above, and it had been changing hands quietly for years, moving through a succession of management companies that raised rents and fixed nothing. He had not missed a payment. Not once in 11 years. He paid the first of every month and he kept the receipt. That was Marcus. That was the whole of him if you reduced him to his actions, a man who showed up, paid what he owed, kept receipts, and returned the money that wasn't his. She had built her company from a single block of distressed properties in a mid-sized Ohio city in 2004. She had grown up watching her father lose a laundromat because he could not read a lease, and she had decided at 19 that she would learn everything. He had not had the chance to learn. She had taken every real estate course the community college offered. She had apprenticed herself to a property manager for 4 years at a wage that barely covered rent. She had been dismissed, condescended to, passed over, and on 3 separate occasions had been told by men at closing tables that her financing would not hold. Her financing always held. By the time she stood at Marcus's cart on Delmar and 5th, her company managed 47 properties across 3 states and had a portfolio value that a local business magazine had estimated, conservatively she knew, at $80 million. She did not correct the figure publicly. She found it useful that people underestimated. The corner at Delmar and 5th was a property she had been watching for 2 years. The 3-story building had been poorly managed and was about to go into receivership. The block had a specific quality she had learned to recognize over 20 years. Solid bones, terrible care, a location that transit maps and demographic data told her was going to matter in 5 years. She had been building a relationship with the receivership attorney for 18 months. She had not yet moved. The $300 had been an accident. She had been distracted, thinking through a contract clause, and she had pulled the wrong bills. It happened occasionally. What happened after was not an accident. She sat in her car for a moment after Marcus handed her the money back. She thought about the way he had come around the cart, not rushing, not aggressive, just deliberate, the way a person moves when they know what they are doing and why. She thought about what it cost a man in his position to return $300. She thought about the 11 years implied in the cart's worn, stainless edge, and the practiced ease with which he worked the pans without looking at his hands. She thought about the building. She filed it all and drove home. Across the city, in the cold, Marcus closed his cart and counted his day, $62 after costs, and went home to heat soup and wait for Imani. The winter that followed was the hardest Marcus could remember since Imani's first year of school, when the heat went out in the apartment and he had slept on her floor with his coat over the 2 of them. January that year brought 4 storms and a stretch of cold that cracked the lid of one of his steam pans and sent 2 of his oldest regulars indoors for the whole month. He made $420 in January and wrote a check on the 1st of February that left him with $73 in his account until the following Friday. He did not tell Imani about the $73. He told her the winter was slow but manageable. She knew it was worse than that, she could hear it, and she let him have the dignity of the understatement. He sold a pair of earrings that had been his mother's. He sold them on a Thursday morning at a pawn shop 3 blocks from his apartment for $40, and on the way home he walked past his corner and counted the commuters getting off the bus and felt the particular ache of a man who can see exactly what he needs to do and cannot yet do it. He borrowed nothing. He asked for nothing. He just kept going. By March, the cart was back. By April, he was ahead of where he had been in October. By June, he had replaced the cracked pan lid and started saving again for the storage unit he wanted, the one that would let him carry more product and reduce his morning trips to the supplier. He had a number in mind. He was moving toward it slowly and steadily, the way he moved toward everything. He did not think about the woman in the grey wool coat. He thought about her once in February when business was at its worst, and he thought about how easy it would have been to keep that money. $300 in February. He could see exactly what $300 in February would have meant. He thought about it for about 15 seconds, and then thought about something else. That was not virtue performed for an audience. There was no audience. He was alone on his corner, and his back hurt and his pan lid was cracked. He just could not be someone who kept money that was not his. He had never been able to be that person. He was not sure the world had always rewarded him for it, but it was the only way he knew how to stand up straight. Some people you meet and you think they are making a calculated decision. Marcus was not calculating anything. He was just being Marcus. It took Diane Cole 14 months from the night at the cart to close on the building at Delmar and 5th. The receivership process had moved slowly, as it always did, and there had been a competing bid from a development group that was less interested in the existing tenants and more interested in the land value. She had made her case to the receivership court with specific data: a neighbourhood reinvestment plan, a tenant retention agreement, a capital improvement schedule backed by actual contractor bids. The development group had offered more money and a vague promise about affordable units. The court took 3 months to decide. Diane won on a Tuesday in December, almost 14 months to the week from the night Marcus had handed her back her change. She did not move quickly after that. She spent the first 2 months inside the building, every floor, every tenant, every broken thing that management had logged and ignored. She met the 3 upstairs tenants individually. She had a contractor walk every inch of the ground floor retail space. She reviewed every lease, every payment history, every rent receipt in the management company's files. It was in the rent receipts that she found him. The file was thin and alphabetical, and when she reached the W's and found a folder labelled Webb Marcus Corner Cart, she opened it, expecting a gap, a delinquency, some pattern of delay that would explain the low rent the previous management had charged for an outdoor corner position. She found 11 years of receipts, everyone dated within the first 2 days of the month, everyone signed in a small, careful hand. No gaps, no late fees, no negotiations, just payment, month after month, in the kind of quiet, faithful sequence that most people reserve for the things they love. She sat with the folder for a long time. Then she put on her grey wool coat, a different one from the October night but the same colour because she liked what it communicated, and she walked down to the corner of Delmar and Fifth. It was a Wednesday afternoon in February. Cold again, and Marcus had the cart open and was working the lunch rush, which was what he called the 11 minutes between 11:45 and noon, when the people coming off the late morning bus would stop on their way somewhere warmer. He did not see her come up until she was 2 people back in line. He saw the coat first. He looked at her face. He said, "Ma'am," the same way he had said it 14 months ago, automatic and respectful. She waited until the others had their food. Then she stepped up and she ordered soup, and she held out exact change, and when he handed her the container, she did not move away. "You remember me?" she said. "Grey coat," he said. "October." She nodded. She told him her name. She told him what she did. She said she had been the one watching the building from across the street that night and that she had just purchased it. Marcus was quiet for a moment. He looked at her and then at the building and then back at her. "I had no idea," he said, and the plainness of it landed between them like a stone dropped in still water. "I know," she said. "That's why I'm here." She asked him to come inside when he had a moment to close up. She said she had something to show him. He told her he would be there at 2 when the lunch window closed. He was there at 1:45. The inside of the building smelled of old plaster and effort. Diane had set up a folding table in the ground floor space that had been a dry cleaner, and before that, from the look of the floor, a barber shop. She had a manila folder on the table and 2 paper cups of coffee she had brought from somewhere, and the rent receipt file, his 11 years of payments, set beside the folder. Marcus looked at the file. He recognized the edge of his own receipts. "I pulled every payment record in this building," she said. 11 years, not one missed, not one late. He was quiet. "I know what this corner cost you this past winter," she said. "I saw the management company's complaints log. They raised your rate in October, the same week you came out in the cold, and gave me back $300. He had not thought about the timing. He thought about it now. "I'm redoing all the ground floor leases," she said. "I want to offer you something different." She opened the manila folder. There were 2 documents inside. The first was a new rental agreement, his rate locked for 5 years, below what he was currently paying, with a capital improvement clause that covered repairs to the corner's electrical connection, which had been failing intermittently for 2 years. The second document was something else. She let him read it before she explained. It took him a minute. He was not a lawyer. He read slowly and carefully, the same way he kept receipts. The second document was an option to purchase a 10% share in the building at a price set today and held for 3 years. A real estate option. If he chose to exercise it, the monthly payments would be structured so that a portion of his ongoing corner rent applied toward the purchase price. She had done the math and a lawyer had reviewed it, and it was real. Marcus put the document down. He pressed his hand flat to the table and he looked at the stained ceiling of the old dry cleaner space, and he was quiet for a long time. "Why?" he said. It was not quite a question. It was the only word he had. Diane wrapped both hands around her coffee cup. Because 11 years is a fact, she said, and what you did in October was a fact. And I have been in this business long enough to know that those kinds of facts are rare and worth something. She paused. And because you didn't know who I was. If you had known, it would have meant something different. You didn't know. You just... She stopped. You just did what you do. Marcus looked at the documents again. He looked at his 11 years of receipts in their thin folder. He thought about the aspirin and Imani's nightly calls and the cracked pan lid and the $40 for his mother's earrings and the $73 left in February that he had not told his daughter about. He picked up the pen she had set beside the folder. He signed the rental agreement first. Then he set the option document to the side. I want to read this again, he said. I want my daughter to look at it. She's practical. Take it, Diane said. Take as long as you need. He folded the option document carefully and put it in his coat pocket. He stood and he picked up the paper cup of coffee and he looked at this woman who had come back to a street corner in February with a folder and a fact. And he felt something he would spend weeks trying to name, not gratitude exactly, though it was that too, and not disbelief, because somehow it didn't feel entirely unbelievable. It felt like something that had been moving toward him for a long time through all the cold mornings and the careful payments and the returned money, and had simply arrived. Thank you, he said. He said it the way he said everything, plainly and without performance. Thank you, she said back, and she meant it. Take a moment and think about what 14 months of not knowing looked like for Marcus. Every bill paid, every shift worked, every temptation set aside. He had no idea anything was coming. That is exactly what made it real. He called Imani that night before she could call him. She answered on the second ring and heard something different in his voice before he said a word. Dad, she said. What happened? He told her. He told her slowly, the same way he moved, and she was quiet through most of it, and when he finished she was silent for a long time. The option, she said. Does it have a sunset clause? 3 years, he said. That's what I understood. Send me a picture of the pages, she said. I'll read it tonight. She called back at 11:30, which she almost never did. She had read the document twice and had looked up the attorney named on the header and verified the firm was real and licensed. Dad, she said, this is real. I know, he said. This is actually real. Imani. Okay. He could hear her pulling herself together. Okay, here's what I think you should do, she told him. He listened. He took notes in the small, careful handwriting that also appeared on 11 years of rent receipts. He did not sleep much that night, but it was a different kind of wakefulness from the kind he usually knew. The February kind, the aspirin kind, was sharp and anxious, counting what was missing. This kind was quieter. It was the feeling of a man who has carried something heavy for a long time and has just been told he can set it down, and is not yet sure his arms know how. He exercised the option 22 months later. The process was not simple. Imani finished her nursing program and came home for the closing, wearing the same expression she wore when she was managing something important, serious and focused, and trying not to smile. They sat at a real closing table with real documents and a notary, and her attorney and Marcus's attorney, a man named Reggie, whom Imani had found through the nursing school's alumni legal network and who had reviewed every page twice. Marcus signed his name where he was told to sign it. Each time he signed, he thought, this name has been on receipts for 11 years. Now it is on this. When it was over, Diane shook his hand across the table and he shook it back, and Imani, who had held it together through the whole signing, pressed her hand to her mouth in the particular way that meant she was going to cry, and did not want anyone to see. He saw. He put his arm around her, and she put her head on his shoulder, and neither of them said anything for a moment, because there was nothing to say that the fact itself did not already say more clearly. The building had 8 tenants by then. Diane had renovated the upstairs units, repaired the electrical on the ground floor, replaced the old HVAC. The dry cleaner space had become a small barber shop, a proper one this time, run by a man named Carlton, who had been looking for a corner location for 3 years and had been priced out of everyone. The building was not a luxury property. It was a working building on a working street, full of people who paid on time and needed what they needed, and had not expected anyone to notice. Marcus kept the cart. People asked him about that sometimes, in the months after the closing, when word got around the block the way it always does. A man who owned 10% of a building but still came out in the cold to run a corner cart. He never had a long answer for it. The cart was his. The cart was what he knew. The cart was where everything had started, and on the good days, and there were more good days now, it still felt like the most honest thing he had. He had repaired the pan lid properly, had upgraded the propane line, had added a second steam pan for the winter menu. He had raised his prices modestly for the first time in 4 years. Imani got a position at a hospital 3 miles from the building. She came by the cart 2 or 3 times a week on her days off, and Marcus would fix her whatever she wanted without charging her, and she would lean against the cart with her paper cup and talk to the regulars, who treated her like they had known her for years because they had, through Marcus's stories, and she would look at her father in the cold and the steam and feel the particular peace of watching someone be exactly who they are supposed to be. There was a morning, about a year after the closing, when Marcus arrived at his corner before dawn. He unlocked the cart and set up the pans and lit the propane, and stood in the dark for a moment before the city fully woke. The building was there above him, its windows dark at that hour, and he could see the barbershop's hand-painted sign, and the lit entry and the faint glow from the second-floor apartment where the woman with the baby lived, the one who was almost always up before dawn too. He stood there and breathed out slowly, and his breath made a small cloud in the cold air and dissolved. And somewhere in the building above him was a document with his name on it that said, he was part of this corner, this block, this brick and glass and working life. He had not taken the money. That was still the fact. That was still the root of everything. Not talent, not luck, not connection. Just a man who could not keep what was not his, even when it was $300 and February was coming and nobody was watching. He thought about it sometimes the way you think about the small hinge moments in a life, the ones that did not feel like choices at the time because they were too obvious to feel like choices. He had not chosen to be the kind of person who returned the money. He had simply been him, and being him had been enough. If you have ever been told that doing the right thing when no one is watching is its own reward, and felt the smallness of that, felt how insufficient that sounds against an actual cold winter and an empty account. Marcus's story is for you, because he did not get the reward because he had expected one. He got it because someone who had learned to recognize the shape of real character had been standing across the street. The corner of Delmar and Fifth was not a famous intersection. It did not appear in any city guide. It was just a place where people got off buses and bought soup in paper cups and went on about their lives, and where a man had stood for 11 years in the cold and the heat and had been every single day exactly who he was. The cart was still there. That morning before dawn, Marcus turned on the heat and let the first pan begin to steam and listened to the city come awake around him. He thought about Imani, still sleeping a few miles east. He thought about Carlton in the barber shop, who would open in 2 hours and come out to unlock his gate and nod at Marcus the way they nodded at each other every morning now. He thought about Diane, who had built something real out of careful attention and who had looked at 11 years of rent receipts and known what they meant. He thought about the $300. He almost smiled. He set up the second pan and got to work. If someone you know has ever been the kind of person who holds on past the point where holding on makes sense, who shows up, who pays what they owe, who does the right thing without an audience, leave a word for them. They deserve to be seen. And if this story sat with you, there is another one waiting that I think you will carry just as long. Marcus turned 53 that spring. Imani baked a cake and brought it to the cart on his birthday morning, which was a Saturday, and set it on the stainless counter and told him he was not allowed to sell any of it, that it was just for people who stopped and wanted a piece, free of charge, because her father had been feeding this corner for 11 years and that deserved a party whether he wanted one or not. He did not argue with her. He never could. By 10 o'clock there were 15 people on the sidewalk, and Carlton had come out from the barber shop without his apron, and the woman from the second floor had come down with the baby on her hip, and someone had brought a portable speaker that played something warm and easy. Marcus stood behind his cart and watched his corner on a Saturday morning in spring, and felt the quiet of a man who has been made whole, not suddenly but slowly, over 11 years of small, faithful decisions, each one building on the last the way a corner gets its footing, the way a building earns its ground. He cut the cake himself. He gave everyone a piece. The first slice he set on a napkin on the cart's edge, the way he set everything. Steady, deliberate, with both hands. It was still there when the morning was over. He brought it inside. There had been a version of Marcus who almost did not stay in the city. It was after Celeste left in the second year of the cart when the winter had gone on, longer than usual, and a pipe in the apartment had burst, and the landlord had taken 3 weeks to fix it, and Marcus had come home every night from the corner to an apartment that smelled of damp and felt borrowed from someone else's life. He had a cousin in Atlanta, a man named Darnell who worked HVAC and had been telling Marcus for years that the money was better in the South, that the work was steady, that he could get Marcus on with the same company if Marcus wanted to come down and try. Marcus had packed a bag. He had actually packed a bag. It sat on the foot of his bed for 11 days, and he looked at it every morning when he woke up and every night when he came in from the corner. On the 12th day, Imani had called. She was in high school then, living with her aunt on the east side while she finished her junior year, and she had said, in the way teenagers say things that land harder than they mean them to, "Daddy, you're not going anywhere. That corner needs you." He had not said anything for a moment. "I might go to Atlanta," he had said. "No, you won't," she had said, and she had been right. He unpacked the bag. He called Darnell and told him he appreciated the offer, but he was staying. He called his landlord and told him in precise and measured terms what the city's habitability code said about burst pipes and repair timelines, information he had looked up at the library the previous Saturday morning, and the landlord had the pipe fixed within 48 hours. That was the other thing about Marcus. He did not make noise. He did his homework and he spoke plainly, and he did not need anyone to be afraid of him to get the thing done. Imani knew this about her father better than she knew almost anything else about him. She had watched him navigate 11 years of small indignities and small obstacles with the same patient, methodical care he brought to everything, and she had modelled something in herself on it without quite being able to name what it was. Her nursing supervisors called her unflappable. She had heard that word applied to her father once, years ago, by a customer at the cart, an older man who came every Thursday for soup, and had said it in the way of a compliment, the highest kind, the kind that names the quality that holds everything else up. Unflappable. That was Marcus. The option document had tested that quality, not the fact of it, which he absorbed with the same steadiness he absorbed everything, but the waiting, the 22 months between signing the rental agreement and closing on the option. There were 3 moments in those months when he had wondered whether it was real, not because Diane gave him any reason to doubt it, but because Marcus had spent 51 years being a man to whom large, good things did not generally happen, and his nervous system had not fully updated its priors. The first moment of doubt was in the 4th month, when the option document was just sitting in the folder he had dedicated to it in his filing cabinet. Imani's idea, the filing cabinet purchased at an estate sale for $22, and nothing was happening, and the corner was slow, and his lower back was doing its usual commentary, and he thought, maybe that was charity. Maybe she felt bad about something. Maybe this is not going to amount to what it looks like it amounts to. He called Reggie, the attorney. He did not apologize for calling. He said he had a question about whether the option was still active and what would constitute a trigger for the clock to start. Reggie told him the option was valid. The clock was waiting for Marcus to elect to exercise it, and that Marcus could sit on it for up to 3 years from the signing date. "Is there anything I should be doing?" Marcus said. "Saving," Reggie said, "and watching the building. Pay attention to what she does with it." Marcus paid attention to what she did with it. He watched the contractors come in the spring of the first year. He watched the HVAC trucks and the electrical trucks and the window crew who replaced the third-floor windows that had been painted shut since, by the look of them, the late 90s. He watched Carlton move into the barbershop space in May and set up his chair and tape his license to the wall and put a hand-lettered sign in the window. He watched a young family move into the second-floor unit in July, the one that had been empty for 2 years because the management company had never gotten around to replacing the flooring after a water leak. He watched Diane show up on the 3rd Saturday of every month with a clipboard and walk the building, every unit, every common area, every inch of the exterior she could see, and she would make notes on her clipboard and call contractors on her phone and occasionally stop at his cart and buy soup and say nothing about the building, ask nothing about the option, just buy soup and pay the correct amount. She never overpaid again. He noticed. By the end of the first year, Marcus had watched enough to understand something he had not fully understood before. This woman was not a speculator. She was not flipping the building. She was building something that was supposed to last. The improvements were not cosmetic. The repairs went to the bones. The tenants she selected, and he talked to them because that was what you did on a corner. You talked to people, were people with histories, references, work, Roots, the second-floor family, Carlton, a woman named Pat, who opened a small alterations shop on the ground floor in October and who had been doing alterations in her apartment for 9 years, waiting for a space she could afford. Marcus watched all of this from his corner and thought about the document in his filing cabinet, and for the first time in his life considered what it might mean to be part of something that was built to last. He talked to Imani about it. He talked to her more than he usually talked to anyone, which meant he talked to her in long stretches of their nightly calls instead of the shorter ones, and she would ask questions and he would answer them, and she would be quiet in that way of hers that meant she was thinking and not yet done. She knew what she was doing when she bought it. Imani said one night, she's not going to let it go bad. That's the point. I know, Marcus said, and the option is real. Reggie confirmed it twice. Then the only question is whether you can get to the cash position to exercise it by year 3. That was the question. The option price was structured to be accessible to him, and Diane had been careful about that. And Marcus had read the math 3 times, and Imani had read it twice, and Reggie had confirmed it once. It required a down payment that was the most money Marcus had ever needed to move at one time. Not impossible. Not comfortable either. He did 3 things in the second year of the option. He raised his prices a second time, moderately, and lost 1 regular and gained 4 new ones who had started working in the renovated building and needed lunch. He picked up a weekend catering arrangement with a community centre 6 blocks away, serving lunch at their Saturday programming, which added an average of $340 per month to his take. And he sold nothing he did not need to sell and bought nothing he did not need to buy, and at the end of the 22nd month he called Reggie and said he was ready. Reggie said he was ready too. The closing had been on a Thursday in October, almost exactly 2 years after Marcus had stood in the cold and pressed $300 back into a stranger's hand. He had not known that until Imani pointed it out on the drive back from the closing table. She had looked at her phone and then at him and said, "Dad, do you know what month this is?" He had looked at the window. "October," he said. "2 years," she said. "Almost exactly 2 years." He had thought about that for the rest of the drive home. 2 years of receipts. 2 years of watching and saving and calling Reggie and talking to Imani and working his corner in the cold and the heat and not taking shortcuts and not making noise and not giving up. 2 years that had looked from the outside exactly like the 11 years before them. The same cart and the same corner and the same careful man, except that there was now a document in his filing cabinet that was becoming a deed with his name on it. He had not changed. The world had caught up to where he already was. The building on Delmar and 5th was not the most valuable thing Marcus owned. The most valuable thing he owned was harder to put in a folder. It was the quality that Diane had recognised from across a parking structure on an October night. The quality she had confirmed when she pulled the rent file and found 11 years of unbroken proof. It was the quality Imani had named when she was 16 years old and said, "That corner needs you." It was the quality Carlton saw every morning when he unlocked his barbershop gate and nodded at the man behind the cart, the one who had been there before the building was worth anything and would probably be there long after. It was the quality of showing up, of paying what you owe, of returning what is not yours, even when returning it costs you something real. Marcus had carried that quality through bad months and lost equipment and a burst pipe and a packed bag and $40 for his mother's earrings and $73 left on a February morning when the world was cold and the right thing was the only thing he knew how to do. He had carried it all the way to a closing table. On the morning of his birthday, with the cake on the stainless counter and Imani's hand-painted sign, and Carlton without his apron and the baby from the second floor, and the music coming from somewhere, and 15 people on a Saturday sidewalk. Marcus stood in the middle of his corner and looked at the building above him and at the street and at his daughter, and thought about all the mornings that had led here, all the mornings nobody had seen. Somebody had seen. Eventually, somebody always sees. He cut the first piece of cake and gave it to Carlton, who took it with both hands. The day warmed. The music kept going. The cart did its usual work, and on the corner of Delmar and 5th, in the particular piece of a man who has come all the way through to the other side of his own faithfulness, he turned his face to the spring and was content.